Hi, my name's Duncan from SSW, and I just finished a fantastic interview with Justin Schwartzenberger, who is the Pluralsight author for a great course about using TypeScript and AngularJS. And I really wanted to get a hold of Justin because I watched his course and I found it really helped me with some of the challenges I was having joining these two technologies together. So it was a really good interview because Justin really kind of highlights some of the key benefits of using Angular and TypeScript together in terms of how to leverage the most out of using interfaces with your services and your controllers. It's a great interview and I hope you enjoy it.
You're an author on Pluralsight, not just about TypeScript and AngularJS, but several courses. But what else do you do in your life? Maybe you'd like to introduce yourself a bit further.
Sure, yeah. I'm currently cast in the role of lead engineer at SoCreate, where we're building the future of screenplay writing software. I've been doing web development for the past 13, 14 years professionally. And I live in both sides of the fence, full stack, and just enjoying it, loving doing the dev thing. So
cool, very cool. And obviously you've done a fair bit of Angular and TypeScript, but I guess the real question probably on people's minds right now is, what's in it for me? What's the benefit of joining these two things together, to join TypeScript and Angular together? So in your eyes, what would you say makes it worth it?
Well, currently we're working with Angular and TypeScript at our company. We've done some projects with that. We actually started doing a project, straight vanilla JavaScript for Angular, and knew that TypeScript was really something that we thought would be fit really well with it. We put it off, lived building our architecture for a while, which is straight vanilla JavaScript, and then introduced TypeScript. So we actually played on both sides there. And once we introduced TypeScript, a lot of things really started coming together. It really was a good fit. The ability for the strong typing, interfaces, AngularJS has a lot of focus around dependency injection. So the TypeScript, the strong typing, the interfaces play really well into that. You have a lot of moving parts, a lot of modularity, different places, the ability to have strong typing that spans across those things, ties that stuff together, especially within the IDE. It really comes into play. It fits really nice. So, yeah.
Excellent. And how long has this project been running for now for you guys?
We spent a good amount of several months building the architecture with it, our own architecture using Angular, using TypeScript, and then a couple months after that, we've been really full force building that thing out, adding more features, doing refactoring, that sort of thing. So.
And obviously you're a big fan at this stage of joining TypeScript with Angular together.
Yeah, I really am. It's, I don't know if TypeScript fits everywhere for every framework or every solution, but it really seems to fit really nice for Angular. Yeah.
Because I know we've had this chat before about how here at SSW we kind of think of TypeScript being like visiting your grandmother's house, and when you visit your grandmother's house, there's always these extra rules. But if you can put up with those extra rules, you're probably going to get some of grandmother's cake. And TypeScript kind of, we all joke that we wouldn't want to go back now. We've converted over to using TypeScript. We kind of we feel funny when we're not using it. So it's something that I hear a fair bit. I'm not sure if you hear that from developers who have started kind of using TypeScript or not.
Yeah, I think certainly that's the million-dollar question that people ask. Why would I even want to use it, right? Like, it's so much extra. It's just all this, stuff. I just want to write JavaScript. There's a lot of aversion to it, right? But I think once people start playing with it or getting involved in it and doing it, then that aversion comes away, and you start saying, well, hey, let's go back to grandma's house, let's go there again. She got some good candy she gives out, she always has some fun stuff to do. So
so what do you think are some of the benefits? We've kind of touched on the topics here a little bit about Angular and some of the broad things, but what are some of the major, say the top 3 things that would be the benefits, do you think, around using Angular with TypeScript?
Angular and TypeScript. I'd say the strong typing would probably be the first. The ability to really know what those Angular services, value types, constants, those sort of things are working with. That's pretty important. The refactor story is really big, especially within the IDE. You know, I mean, in an Angular app, especially in a larger Angular app, you know, beyond the to-do app, right? That you're really now architecting this solution, and you're using some style guides. You know, there's several of them out there that are really popular. Most of them focus around separate files within your application for each type of thing. You know, a separate file for each service, a separate file for each controller, each directive. So you're really now spanning JavaScript across multiple files. And when you ask a typical IDE development environment to try and track down this name of this variable, and you want to change it, or you want to change this method signature, the story's not really there. You know, it's getting better with some IDEs, but it's not really there, right? You add TypeScript to that mix, and now all of a sudden the IDE has this strong support for navigating across multiple files within your solution. And you do a rename of a variable, or you change a method signature in a service, and all of a sudden you've got the IDE can scope across your files, find those changes for you. You can feel pretty confident that it's catching all those things, you know. And, you know, when you're in a client-side world, and especially in JavaScript, it's a lot harder to debug, you know, those sort of scenarios when you're dealing with them live out in the wild. Users are using that code, so it's really big in maintaining and managing a business application, or any type of application that you want to value the integrity of the business logic of that application. And like any application, you know, you're going to get new features even as soon as an application goes live out there. I mean, you're pretty much guaranteed the refactor game starts right then. You know, you're going to get a call about a bug, or a call about some, you know, additional not this field's needed or whatnot. And now you're into that refactor world. So, I mean, that story, to be able to do that confidently and catch scenarios like that is pretty important.
Yeah. And I guess coming from, I know you've mentioned, you know, you have a Microsoft background, and, you know, if you're using Visual Studio and C#, you're used to some of that tooling where you can go to definition and right-click rename and all those things. So I guess that's what you're kind of saying here, being able to get all that goodness with TypeScript in your JavaScript that you're used to as a C# developer.
And like you mentioned, it's not just the refactor, it's the navigation of your code. You know, the ability to go to definition, find usages on things, all that navigation type stuff within your code that you get through the IDE, through the strong typing of TypeScript, as well as the interfaces, which would be the third thing. I mean, interfaces are, you know, I mean, they don't transpile down, obviously, to JavaScript, but they're so handy, especially in a dependency injection world within Angular. So,
yeah, being able to go dot spacebar and, you know, seeing all those things that you've got an opportunity to use. Yeah. So
all the IntelliSense.
Yeah. So what's it like for a new developer coming onto your team if they are, say, new to TypeScript? You know, what's their experience coming into like a decent sized application?
Right. Well, you know, it depends. I mean, if you got a developer that has familiarity with an object-oriented language, or that sort of thing, then the step over is not so bad. Let's say they don't have as much JavaScript experience, right? But with TypeScript, they see things that are familiar to them. They see classes, you know, the strong typing. They see some interfaces. That story, you know, for them to work with that code is a little bit easier in that scenario because they're already familiar with those sort of things. Now, there's still certainly a lot of, you know, logistics in there, performance, all that sort of things that come with JavaScript, and living in a client-side world that are different that they still have to adapt to. But at least there's an anchor there for them to start with rather than jumping straight into JavaScript. And, I mean, another angle on that too is the fact that they can do some of the things or not do some of the things that could get them into trouble if they're just jumping straight into JavaScript. They may think along the lines of an object-oriented programming language, or you know, something like C# or something that you're used to, and start doing a similar pattern to something in JavaScript and get into trouble, right? Or types, they're kind of guided into something that's familiar to them, but then also has some protection. So
so not too much complaining, and people tend to get on board pretty quick, huh?
Well, I mean, where I work, they kind of have to get on board. Right?
Yeah,
So,
not much choice. Yeah.
yeah, but I guess if you're talking about an open source project or something, yeah, sure. But this is kind of like, well, hey, this is what we're at, and
Well,
so
TypeScript's an
we'll help you
interesting.
get there. Yeah.
It's an interesting beast. You see more and more of the kind of the open source community using it, and I'm always surprised to see how many people might use it for something like Node or other things outside of Visual Studio. So it's
Right,
kind of interesting.
right.
Yeah,
There's a good story around it. A good story is not just proprietary like Microsoft TypeScript or sort of thing. It really is, hey, we're trying to reach and get out to show that this is, hey, an advantage sort of thing. Just another
yeah.
tool belt.
And you've spoken about how TypeScript and ECMAScript 6, kind of aligned. Have you got anything more you'd like to share about that, or your thoughts on potential benefits?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one thing that's TypeScript is designed around writing ECMAScript 6 similar type of syntactical code. And I think that for me, I think that once they announced Angular 2.0 and there was a talk of AtScript and potential TypeScript and more class-based stuff around that, the story of if you're utilizing TypeScript now in your Angular maybe makes it easier to adopt or go down that road. I mean, obviously the future's the future. We don't know yet, but I mean, regardless, if ECMAScript 6 is on the horizon, right? And frameworks, most likely Angular is going to want to look at, leveraging that. Then you're kind of aligning yourself and writing similar code to that now. And you can take some things on in writing Angular apps right now, 1.3, 1.4 in the future, using TypeScript that can kind of get you in a similar sort of pattern, that maybe helps you for the future if you're worried about, the upgrade path and stuff like that. So,
Yeah. So you're talking mostly there, like kind of the class structure of ECMAScript 6 and constructors and those sorts of the ways of doing it. Yeah.
Right. That, and then function declarations, and then the fat arrow, using the fat arrow, and the protection of the this keyword, stuff like that. Some of those patterns that are there in TypeScript now that are supposedly aligning up with ECMAScript 6. You can get into that rhythm, and then also have some code that is a little easier to future forward. So.
Is that something your team ever thought about? Should we go down the ECMAScript 6 path, or should we go down the TypeScript path, or it was kind of clear that it was going to be TypeScript?
Yeah, I think that it definitely was. It was something that we were aware of, and I think that at the time we saw TypeScript as being that solution for writing ECMAScript 6. Now they have like is it 6 to 5? I think it's 6 to 5 that's out there live for converting stuff, and we weren't too familiar with that at the time, so we didn't really know. TypeScript seemed like the option to be able to start writing ECMAScript 6 type of stuff, not get too far away from that. So that was kind of now looking at it. If we looked at it now, I would say it'd probably still be TypeScript on the radar for us, but something like 6 to 5 would be something that we would consider looking at.
So one of the things that I've also heard you talk about, and I've experienced firsthand when you start doing Angular with TypeScript, is you start writing a lot more code. And is that something that you find that you definitely do, or sometimes do, or?
No, certainly all the time. We're typing all the things, really. So you definitely are. From just giving everything a type to building out interfaces to writing promises in the promise chain and typing out all those. And promise chain has inline functions, and now you're doing the fat arrow with that to really type those things correctly. What they're taking in and what they're receiving. Next thing you know, it's got several lines of code for one thing that you may have written in 2 lines of code before. So it's certainly part of it.
And how do you get around that? How do you, I know there's probably, well, there's like a payoff once you've got it typed and you get that fantastic IntelliSense. But is there any special tips that you have or things that you found can really help mitigate some of that extra typing you have to do?
Yeah. one of the things that we use Visual Studio as our development environment, and we use ReSharper. So we leverage the file templates and live templates that ReSharper supports. We build out a lot of our kind of boilerplate code for our projects around utilizing that. So we'll have things like controller file templates and services file templates that will do some of that initial scaffolding of the controller class creation and constructor and registration with Angular, typing out those things, setting up an interface for, let's say, a controller scope above that with some hot zones where you can, as soon as you create the file, can skip through, it'll ask you the interface name, and then it'll auto create the class name from that interface name, and do some of the method stuff. Same thing we have service class templates for just regular service, and then like a CRUD operation service. So it'll fill out the CRUD methods in your interface based on a naming convention that we have for those different create, read, update, and delete statements. So a lot of that stuff getting up and going. And then from there, the IntelliSense within the IDE, once you have those interfaces there, you're able to start using that typing and get some IntelliSense. You can type a couple letters and bam, hit tab, you're up and going. So that alleviates it some. And then with the latest version of ReSharper, they've introduced a lot more TypeScript support. Things like creating a class, defining that it implements an interface, and then doing like an alt enter if you're on PC to auto fill in auto implement the interface, right? Yeah. So you can just get up and run and write your interface really quick, and then fill out the guts of your class pretty quickly too. So all those things combined reduce that amount of typing, all the things, make it manageable, and make it enjoyable at that point as well. And so you can get more adoption towards people not spending the time complaining that they have to type a lot.
Yeah, it sounds really interesting. I haven't tried some of the templating with the ReSharper, but I've definitely been using their new kind of implement members and write your interface and implement all the members in your class straight away just from a click. And I found that really, really nice to do that. So the tooling's pretty sweet.
It is. And that's what, we do a lot of C# development as well. And we've had ReSharper for a long time with that. And so a lot of things that we're used to, like that, implement the interface and stuff that we have over there, now we have on the TypeScript side. And so it just allows us to be more productive and save that time. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. So it kind of leads me on to thinking about third-party libraries. What's your team's experience been using third-party libraries? Maybe things like Kendo or Lodash or things like that.
Sure. There was a time pre our Angular and TypeScript type projects. There's we leverage a lot of third-party libraries out there to do different things. One of our most recent approaches is to kind of not take on anything unless we feel it's absolutely necessary, mainly to reduce bloat, reduce extra type of code, extra library that we're building in. One of the things that we're really focusing on as we build this future app of screenplay writing is performance and speed, and so an ability to use that from any type of device, right? So not taking on extra JavaScript code bits to deliver over the wire is pretty key for us. So we really put this rule that we're not going to bring in any other third-party library unless we have the ability to kind of pick and choose pieces of that library to bring in. You mentioned Lodash. That's something that we took on. It's the one kind of library that we really are leveraging now, and that's because we're able to do kind of like a custom build of that. So only pick a couple things that we are using in that. And then it has pretty good TypeScript support. There's a definitely TypeScript library for that. And so far, we've had good luck with it. That's another angle to that, though, taking on not only the bloat of another library, but also what's the TypeScript story around that, right? Now you're throwing in a whole different ball game here that you're playing. It's not just the JavaScript. Now it's like, well, your project won't compile if you try and use it in a certain way that doesn't have a definition for this variable type, right, that's returned from this function. And so then you're at the point of you go, well, do we type it with any type, you know, and just let it ride? Or do we try and give it what it specifically is? But then when you do that, now you're in the boat of, we're leveraging a definitely type library, right? But we customized it for Lodash or whatever. You know, we haven't experienced that with Lodash yet, but let's say another third-party library. And now you're maintaining your own internal definitely typed version of their definitely typed, right? And then an update comes along, and now what do? Do you just take the update and have to manage that? And so I think that's another aspect that comes into play is like, what's the TypeScript story for that particular library if we are going to take it on?
Yeah, that's a really good point. And you know, if you have everything update all at once, and Angular goes to a new version, and then Lodash goes to a new version, and then you've got ReSharper as a version behind, and then you've got definitely typed, and you know, because so that could be a real challenge. It'd be an interesting time to see if you got all of those things at once. It could be a bit of a nightmare. But yeah. But I guess at the end of the day, you can always go type them up in the interim and have your own kind of bridge, but that would get messy doing your own definitely typed all the time.
Sure, and then maintaining it, you know. So yeah, I don't know.
Well, it sounds like you guys have quite a neat approach, and you're probably not going to end up in that sort of challenge if you haven't got too many dependencies on third-party libraries.
Yeah, I mean that's what we're shooting for, and so far we've been pretty successful with that. Like I said, we've implemented Lodash, and the elements of that we have used, we've had good success. We've gone through some updates on that, and pretty painless. So so far so good.
Excellent. And what about the unit testing story? Does unit testing play nicely with TypeScript and Angular?
Yeah, so you know it does. We kind of leverage unit testing as more of kind of like a tool in our tool belt, rather than doing really like test-driven development per se. We kind of unit test the things that we feel are valuable to unit test. And that's mostly based around the fact that like the story for unit testing with TypeScript, it's not so much TypeScript, but it is just kind of like JavaScript in general and Angular in general. It's kind of rough when you come from a world of doing something like using NUnit and C#. The ability to just kind of identify, okay, I've got a class, I've got a method within there I want to test, so I want to quickly build a unit test, you know, around that and get up and going. You can do that pretty rapidly within the C# world, right? But in JavaScript, it seems like we're going through a little more steps to do that. Currently, we use Jasmine, and we leverage ReSharper as our test runner. So ReSharper allows you to use Phantom.js to be able to run the JavaScript and execute Jasmine in the test within ReSharper's test runner that is a window within within Visual Studio. So instead of launching it in a browser or running it in command line, we were able to have that test within there. That's something we're familiar with because when we do like NUnit testing in C#, it's right there within the test runner within Visual Studio. So we wanted to keep that experience the same. But and that took a little while to figure out how to get all that set up and actually running, as well as within an Angular project, like what's the story to be able to have this set of tests. It was there were some hoops to get through for that, to be able to just kind of run one method within that test runner, but we finally figured that out. But I think the biggest thing with that unit testing story is like it just feels like there's a lot of before each type of stuff, setup stuff that you have to do. And I think that's kind of, I don't know, feels to me like it's kind of the product of just JavaScript testing and Jasmine maybe in general. I mean, but not to pick on Jasmine or anything. There's other ones that we've explored that kind of feel the same way. It feels like you can't just target, like for example, in Angular, just target a service, target a method within that service and get up and going and test against that.
Yeah.
You know? I don't know. But maybe, I mean, we've also solved that a little bit with some of that scaffolding as far as file templates within ReSharper. We got some unit test file templates that we can get up and go, okay, we're going to test a service. Bam, and, you know, it scaffolds out all kind of the getting things up and running with the mock and stuff like that. So it's not so bad, but yeah.
But you're missing some of the NUnit stuff.
Yeah, it just seems like it's a little, I mean, you know, when you try and get people to buy into unit tests, I mean, I'm a big
Mm-hmm.
proponent of it. I love testing. I love the ability to do that on your code without having to reach the UI and all that
Mm-hmm.
stuff, and the regression of it and stuff like that. But to get people to buy in, you know, I mean, if there's any aversion, if there's any, you know, trip to the step getting there,
Yeah.
people tend to use that as like, oh, I'm just not going to do it, right?
Yeah, it's not worth
And
it. It takes too long.
right.
Yeah.
It's like even if it takes a couple minutes more, it's just like, oh, this is too much, right? I can get to writing the next piece of code. So you know, so we know that we got to kind of alleviate that if we want to get buy-in. Yeah, so it's kind of tough, but it's not too bad. So
Yeah.
and then as far as the TypeScript playing, like, you know, there were some changes to get. You know, again, we did this whole application, our previous application, we started down the road using just plain vanilla JavaScript,
Mm-hmm.
and we brought TypeScript into the mix. And we had already had unit tests written in Jasmine prior to that. All we really had to do was kind of convert it to the TypeScript format. There really wasn't anything that we felt as a barrier by having TypeScript in the mix. It was just, you know, the other stuff.
So what I'm hearing is you found, you know, there's a bit of setup involved and you type more with TypeScript, and then you get this great tooling and you get go to definition and you get right click rename, and there's all these other goodies once you get over the extra typing.
Right.
Is there any other downsides besides typing more with TypeScript in your mind?
I mean, there's a few things here and there. Some of the stuff I mentioned in my Pluralsight course, one of the things is that in order to create classes, you end up having to put them in a TypeScript module.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, you want to do that in order to get them inside an IIFE.
Mm-hmm.
But now when you do that, TypeScript compiles it down into multiple nested IIFEs because it's doing this whole namespace thing with these global variables in the case that you may want your class to be public.
Yeah.
But in the scenario of Angular, you really can write classes without making them public, without, you know, exporting them, because of all dependency injection that happens. So you kind of take on a little bit of overhead with the compiled JavaScript. Now that's something that, you know, the transpiler is doing, and maybe that's something that'll change in the future as far as how TypeScript compiles. It could identify that you're not exporting that class and maybe not do that and just put a simple IIFE around it. Little things like that. But I mean, those are not really, you know, big barriers as opposed to, you know, hey, you're spending more upfront time typing all the things. But again, I mean, you either invest that time up front or you invest that time later when you're having the debug story or the refactor story be more difficult. And you kind of measure it upon, you know, a lot of people say, well, TypeScript's good for larger size apps and not so much for smaller apps. And I think probably a lot of that comes from the fact of, well, when you have larger apps and you have the more features coming in over time, more refactoring done over time, then it really does become beneficial, and you can reap the rewards of, you can collect that time back, right?
Yeah.
But if you have an app that's smaller scale, and you spend all this time typing everything in the beginning, and then you're maybe not adding features or stuff, and it's kind of short-lived, then yeah, you've invested a bunch of time, you're not recouping that time. It's kind of like just an investment. You know, you're investing early on, and it's going to pay dividends the longer you go, right?
Yeah. So it's an interesting one. I wonder if you could put a time frame on it and say, you know, when you reach so many controllers or so many features or so many modules, at what point, you know, should you start thinking about something like TypeScript? That's an interesting one. What do you think? Do you think you could say something like that? Like, oh, if you're going to be working on a project longer than 3 months, then you should definitely use it, or?
You know, I mean, we've actually thought about that in terms of when we took it on, you know. So our previous project where we brought that in, we really looked at it, and there's a lot of talk out there. People try and put these numbers on, oh, you need to have a team of, I don't know, 50 plus developers, right, to really be there. I definitely think that number is way too high. I mean, we took on this project. We wanted to be able to do it, you know, have the strong typing, but also have the ability that, you know, we lock in the business logic and the integrity of our business logic, that it works well as we make these changes and whatnot, right? And we had a small team that we put on that project, 5-6 developers team head. But the benefit is that the code base had a high enough volume and a high enough importance of that code that you want to have even those 5 people, those 6 people be on the same terms of if they go in to work on a feature and they're tasked to do something that you know that they're not going to get in there and accidentally, you know, change a name and or change a method signature and not know where all it's used, right, and affect an app. And you know, I mean, at any point you have an app that you need the integrity of the business logic to be maintained over time, then I think it becomes worth it, right? No matter what size your team is. So I guess maybe part of it is looking at what is it your app is doing, and how important is it to make sure that it maintains running. I mean, every app is important to keep it running, but you know, there's some apps that, you know, can live with an impact of a feature not working correctly or not dialed in, you know, or little pieces here and there, you know, versus maybe an app that's doing financial transactions across it, you know, taking orders, and there's just a less level of threshold that you can deal with for if a user encounters a problem, you know, how can you recover from that? And when you really need some serious, so you're not sharing photos, you know, it's kind of a leisure thing or something, then you know, it might be worth it to put that safety net on there. You know, that may be the dictating factor, I think. I don't know, I kind of feel that.
Yeah. Well, that's some really good advice. I think it's a big question. I know we had a very interesting experience where we had quite a very, very flat sprint when we introduced TypeScript. There was a lot of overhead, and I think actually a lot of it would have been alleviated if we'd all had the chance to watch your course, honestly, because you know, there was just no good content around. You know, it's about 6 months ago, and you know, there was a couple of blogs around about how to do it, but you know, you just couldn't get good content. And you know, we tried all these different methods and it would just soaked up a lot of time. So you know, I think, you know, thanks to you and other resources, that whole process is getting a little easier for teams. You know, just, you know, people are out there doing it and kind of coming up with better solutions for it. So it's kind of an easier thing to do, but it was definitely a big challenge for us when we first did it, because you know, we already had so much logic as well. So it took a little bit of time to kind of come up with this new way of doing it, and everybody had to be on board in the team. So
and we went through that same process when we were, you know, kind of didn't really have any resources to look at, you know, sort of thing, and had to kind of discover a pattern and way to, you know, do things, and what it meant when we, you know, created these classes for services, and you know, how can we leverage doing interfaces for those services, and what did that reveal, and sort of thing. So you know, in going through that process, I was pretty excited to be able to build that course and share that information with everybody, and give, you know, people hopefully a head start on that to approach it, you know, the way that we approached it, right? And get that chance to really, you know, okay, this makes sense, and you know, and possibly see, you know, I can see how that fits really well, you know, sort of thing. So
it was actually interesting after watching your course. I had to pick up a different project the other day that one of my other team members is looking after, and he's like, can you come have a look at this TypeScript file and the controller and what's it doing and so forth. And I was going, actually, this is kind of pre-watching Justin's course, and I probably wouldn't do it this way. I'd probably go and do it this way. And we had kind of 2 or 3 different methods in the project of how we were setting up controllers, because different developers had done it and so forth. So, you know, it's good to kind of get that, you know, one way of doing it across the project. Absolutely. I'm surprised Microsoft haven't, you know, it's one thing, Microsoft have like a whole bunch of demos of how to use Angular how to use TypeScript with different libraries, but they don't have anything there for Angular last time I looked.
Well, you know, there's a lot of buzz right now out there, different channels and stuff. You're seeing a lot of people, Microsoft talking a lot more about Angular, you know, as of recently. Seen a lot of tweets going out and blog posts, stuff that people are starting to say, you know, some more tooling around. Visual Studio is now providing greater support for Angular and stuff like that. So maybe they're on the verge of talking more about that story. That'd be great if they do, you know.
It was, especially with @script coming with the new Angular 2.0. It'll be an interesting time to watch how that all, you know, how the dust settles, and if they
it'll be really interesting to see that, you know, the TypeScript and their involvement with Angular, they're vocally supporting that they want to be a part of that process, right? And so it'll be really interesting to see how that unfolds, and do they start really coming together, you know? Does TypeScript maybe become what they use instead of @script? You know, how's that going to unfold? But you know, the TypeScript team is definitely talking about how excited they are and how they want to be a part of that process. That's pretty neat. So anxious to see what.
It's always fun to have some new goodies in the pipeline to play with. So it'll be really cool to see what they come up with.
Definitely.
So is there anything else you wanted to add? If someone was kind of interested in TypeScript and Angular, what would be kind of any extra things you'd like to talk about?
You know, I don't know. I mean, you get that fundamentals for TypeScript going. You understand the concepts there. You don't have to really be, an expert at TypeScript. You don't have to be an expert at Angular to start marrying the two together. I think that, part of it is just getting in there and using it. It kind of starts revealing itself. Maybe as you start seeing what you can do in TypeScript, if you have a background on Angular and understand what it's doing as far as the dependency injection and these separate types of controllers and services and stuff, and then you bring TypeScript into the mix after that, it becomes probably easier to see how that fits so well. If you know about value types, values and constants in Angular, right? And all of a sudden you see, wow, with TypeScript, I can give those things an interface. And now when I pass them around and inject them through this string name, right, which Angular does, but now all of a sudden within the development environment, because I've set that up as an interface and declared it as it's coming into my constructor as type this, right? Now all of a sudden I've got IntelliSense on those value types for those constants and those values that are getting passed around. So not just services, not just things like that. It really reveals itself if you have knowledge of Angular first, probably, and then bring the TypeScript into the mix. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe that'd be my hint.
So I'm hearing a lot that interfaces and services are the huge benefit.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I don't know. I would say that's probably the biggest thing. I mean, you do dependency injection, you want those interfaces, and now TypeScript gives that to you, and it feels like it opens up this whole story. Now all of a sudden, all those services that you're injecting into a controller or into another service now are just strongly typed. You get this method hinting and method signature stuff within your IDE from that. You get assurance that you're calling methods that are still there. Somebody goes to the service and wipes out a method, from that interface. Now all of a sudden this other service that was using it, oh, hey, it's not using it correctly anymore, right? Where you just wouldn't have that with TypeScript not in the mix.
And also being at grandma's house, you're going to get a lot of red squigglies across your solution if you did that. Right.
Depending on the grandma and what her style is too. Whatever you might incur some wrath one way or the other. So yeah. But hey, keep grandma happy, then it's a good time.
Absolutely. Obviously, if people are looking to learn more, they should check out your course on Pluralsight. It really is a great course, and you really do kind of go beyond just the basics. It's quite good. So I think it's 3 and a bit hours of content. It's quite a lot.
Just about over 3 hours. Yeah, I try and cover all the core components of Angular and how to build those out in TypeScript, as well as a bunch of gotchas that you run into, trying to help you out before you make those mistakes or before you experience them. Kind of trying to paint the whole picture of what life is using TypeScript and Angular together. So whether you're deciding you want to use it or not, or maybe you're into it already and you need to figure out how you can do it in different ways or solve different problems that you're running into. Hopefully it hits all of those points for people and gives them a guiding path to really enjoy the process instead of struggle with it.
Yeah, it's definitely something, if someone said to me they were going to join them together now with a bit of experience around it, I'd say you want to have a look before you jump in, because you can, there's a lot of kind of different ways of doing it than just writing vanilla JavaScript, like you said. So I think it's a more pleasant experience to kind of get a rough idea first, rather than just trying to start changing all your .js to .ts files and hoping for the best. Right. Which is kind of what we did. So yeah. So thank you very much today. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and it's always a good time to pick your brain and get some gems. So thanks for coming along, and we'll chat again soon.
Sure, definitely. Thanks for having me. I love talking shop. It's been great.
Did you get all that? We'll take the SSW TV quiz and test your knowledge now.